So my name is Ptolemy, and I'm very excited to be here at the IDEA Project today. I'm actually a filmmaker by trade, and I'm going to integrate the thrill of living. It's kind of near and dear to my heart. And this is actually a photo of myself in a zero-G environment with Ray Kurzweil, filming the subject of my film for Transcendent Man, which will be in select theaters this February. You'll be able to download it on iTunes and Netflix in the same month. So that'll be coming out soon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a clip here from the film to introduce you to, or those of you who don't know who Ray Kurzweil is. And can I take a poll? How many people in the audience know who Ray Kurzweil is? Can I see? All right, great, a fair number. Okay. Well, in any case, we'll introduce those of you who don't know who Ray is in this clip. It also introduces his idea about the singularity, this point in the near future when technology will be moving along so fast that we'll actually have to merge with it if we want to actually keep up.
Ray Kurzweil is here. He has been called the rightful heir to Thomas Edison. His new book is entitled The Singularity is Near, When Humans Transcend Biology.
I read your book, some of the most frightening and yet hopeful stuff I've ever read.
Ray Kurzweil is a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence.
He's an award-winning scientist and engineer, a millionaire several times over because of his invention.
He's the holder of 24 patents.
Ray Kurzweil
was chief inventor of the flatbed scanner.
A reading machine for the blind, Kurzweil keyboard synthesizer.
This guy is freaky. Bill Gates has called him the best in the world at predicting the future.
When Ray Kurzweil makes a prediction, lots of folks listen.
He predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union, described the rise of the internet, and foretold the year a computer would beat a chess champion.
According to Ray, you're going to have relationships with machines.
He says computers will have consciousness in just 25 years.
Kurzweil sees a day when microscopic computers will make all kinds of learning as easy as downloading.
You're saying millions of tiny computers floating around in my head?
Fundamentally, you're talking about tampering with humankind.
Inventor Ray Kurzweil thinks that one day humans may be able to live forever.
We come back to this book, to the singularity is near. What does singularity mean?
When you say the singularity is coming, what does that mean exactly?
And that's what you mean by the term singularity?
What is singularity?
Singularity is a future period in which technological change will be so rapid and its impact so profound that every aspect of human life will be irreversibly transformed.
There won't be a clear distinction between humans and machines.
Our computers are not going to be these rectangular devices we put in our pocket. They're going to be inside our bodies and brains, and we're going to be a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence. If you go back 500 years, not much happened in a century. Now a lot happens in 6 months. Technology feeds on itself and it gets faster and faster. In about 40 years, the pace of change is going to be so astonishingly quick that you won't be able to follow it unless you enhance your own intelligence by merging with the intelligent technology we're creating. So that's such a profound transformation that we've borrowed this metaphor from physics and call that a singularity.
All right, so that's a bit of an introduction to Ray and the idea of the singularity. But why do we think we can actually make these forward-looking predictions about the future? And one of the reasons is actually if it's an information technology, if it's computer hardware, we've seen over the course of the last 100 years that the price performance of computer hardware is actually doubling every year, year in and year out. We know, of course, the infamous Moore's Law, the co-founder of Intel, laid down the gauntlet in 1967, and his predictions have borne out exactly true through recession or depression, war, Cold War, for the last 43 years. Ray Kurzweil's made many predictions as well that have borne out in the last roughly 25 years. So we are actually able to make very accurate forward-looking predictions. I couldn't tell you, by the way, who the next president will be or who will win the Super Bowl next year. But if you ask me, the number of MIPS shipped on the internet in 5 years or 10 years from now, we're likely to make a pretty good estimate. Same thing with broadband wireless technology. Anything that's an information technology, we can really offer a really accurate prediction. And another thing we need to understand is exponential growth. As Ray says, the nature of technological progress is exponential. So we have this intuitive, linear view, and it's been programmed into us. We're really hardwired to see the world in this linear way. And so it's actually difficult to see things exponentially. But it's important that we start to look at things exponentially, because more and more facets of our lives are going to be controlled by information technologies and thus be governed by exponential growth. If I count linearly to 30, and I take 30 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 30 steps later I'm going to get to 30. If I count exponentially, 2, 4, 6, 8, or 8, 16, 30 steps later I'm going to get to 1 billion. So it makes a really big difference. Of course, in terms of exponential growth, we see the power and the price performance of exponential growth applied really to computers today. The computer I pull out that's in my pocket actually used to occupy an entire building the size of this theater just 40, 45 years ago. This computer is actually 100,000 times smaller, 1 million times more powerful. That's 1 billion times price performance increase in the last 45 years. Keep in mind, that computer that used to fit in that building, you needed special access to get at it. You needed to be a 3-star general or a special academic or a scientist even to get near it. And that computer couldn't order a pizza. You couldn't get online with it. You couldn't take a picture or a video or play a game on it. So, and also, these new computers are also highly decentralizing because they're going in everyone's pocket. And this exponential trend will continue in the future with the power of the price performance of computers. They'll also get much smaller as well, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We need to understand a little bit about a history of evolution. If we want to know where we're going into this singularity, we need to understand, of course, where we have been and where, and this actually, a history of evolution, you can really look all the way back to the Big Bang, 13.7 billion years ago. And as Ray says, evolution of patterns constitutes the ultimate story of our world. Well, what does he mean by that? What is a pattern? Well, we're all patterns of information. We actually have this conceit that we're this physical stuff. But the reality is the molecules in my body end up replacing themselves every 3 or 4 months, and it's actually the pattern that remains. Same thing with a river. You look at a river or a stream, the water molecules turn over every few months, but it's that pattern that remains. And that is what the river is, actually, that pattern. So as we look back, the universe has been revealing itself in ever more increasing orders of complexity since the very beginning of the Big Bang. The universe revealed itself in atomic structures and then molecules in the furnace of stars. Of course, we fast forward, we have organic molecules in the Cambrian explosion and ultimately DNA, which is a big game changer because it allows the universe to speed up and increase in this iterative process the amount of information it's able to pass along. So we get to DNA. DNA creates microorganisms that actually create things like sensors in order to adapt in their environment. These sensors need a central processing unit, i.e. a brain, in order to process information. So we now have information that's gone from revealed in atoms to molecules to DNA and now brains. And the brains, of course, evolve all the way up to human brains. And humans are a little special. We have this giant cerebral cortex that created ideas and sets of ideas. And we started to make predictions, and we would actually free associate. And so we needed a way to communicate these ideas with other people, and we created technology to do that. We actually created things like storytelling and rhyme and metaphor and allegory so that we could fruitfully take these ideas and actually pass them to someone else and the next generation, which is also the hallmark of a technology, being able to pass it along to another generation. So that leads us actually from the beginning of the universe to today, where we've actually created technology. And now we're at the point, we live at the precise moment, and I call it the universal jackpot lotto, because we actually live at the precise moment when we actually get to merge with this technology we've created for the first time. And again, just like the Cambrian explosion, we're talking about a game changer. It's going to actually be a game changer for everyone in this room, and I believe actually everyone on this planet. So it's an amazing time to be alive and to be born.
People routinely underestimate what's achievable in long periods of time, like 1 decade or 2 decades, because they leave out the radical implications of exponential growth. We can already sense how much more change occurs in a year than in the years before that. You speak to young people, teenagers, and even in their lifetimes, they can see how much more quickly technology moves today than it did 5 years ago. Acceleration of technology is the implication of what I call the law of accelerating returns. The nature of technological progress is exponential. If I count linearly, 30 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I get to 30. If I count exponentially, 2, 4, 8, 16, 30 steps later, I'm at 1 billion. It makes a dramatic difference. About 40 years ago, Gordon Moore saw that there was exponential growth in the power of semiconductors, of chips. Basically, every 2 years, we can put twice as many components on a chip. And because they're closer together, they run faster. And so computers get twice as capable overall for the same price every year. We'll make another billion-fold increase in price performance in the next 25 years. And again, shrink the size of these technologies 100,000-fold. So we went from a building to something that fits in your pocket in 40 years. In the next 25 years, we'll go from something that fits in your pocket to something that's the size of a blood cell. The reason that information technology grows exponentially is that we use the latest technology to create the next. So each new generation of technology grows exponentially in capability, and the speed of that process accelerates over time. This is true in general of an evolutionary process. In fact, even biological evolution, long before even humans evolved, shows the same phenomenon. The very first paradigm in biological evolution was the evolution of DNA. That took 1 billion years, but then evolution adopted it, and it's used it ever since. So the next stage, the Cambrian explosion, when all the body plans of the animals evolved, went 100 times faster, only took 10 million years. After a few more steps, Homo sapiens, the first technology-creating species, evolved, not only took a few 100,000 years. Evolution then shifted from biological evolution to technological evolution. It took tens of thousands of years to evolve stone tools, fire, the wheel. And then we always use the latest technology to create the next technology. So the whole pace of technology has accelerated. Major paradigm shifts like search engines evolved in just 5 or 6 years. And the reason we get to a singularity, a point of astonishingly quick change, is because it's going to go into very fast gear over the next several decades.
Okay, so we're talking about technology a lot, and so I think it's important to point out a couple things that they might seem obvious to some of us, but not obvious to a lot of people. And that's that technology is actually all around us, and it's been around us for the 100,000 years. It's actually defined who we are as a species. So even things like animal husbandry, agriculture, our laws, institution of marriage, our morals, all our whole knowledge base is actually a technology. Even a simple footpath in the forest is actually a form of technology. So this leads us to information technologies. And it's interesting to note that as we talk about what's going to be governed by the law of accelerating returns as information technologies, more and more facets of our lives, industries and sectors in our economy are going to actually be governed by this law of accelerating returns in the next couple decades. It took just 20 years ago, if I wanted to actually send somebody a physical book, let's say across the United States, I had to actually put it in a box and actually ship it by US mail. Today, of course, I can attach that as an email file, put it on YouTube. And so things are becoming information files. You used to have to do that with an album or a CD and also with a movie. And today we can send all those things as information files. I can also replicate those things, so the idea of resource scarcity doesn't apply to them anymore. And I can go inside them, those files, I can manipulate them and edit them. So it changes the whole dynamic of that physical object. Ray talks about the paradigm shift rate doubling every decade, and what does that mean? This is a really great empirical way of looking at how technology is speeding up and we're moving towards this singularity. And if we go back all the way to the printing press, Gutenberg's printing press in the 15th century, we see that it took over a century for that technology to be adopted by a quarter of the European population. Move forward to the telephone, it actually took only 50 years to adopt by 25% of the US population. The television, 25 years. The internet, or the personal computer, 15 years. The internet, 10 years. Search engines like Google and Wikipedia took only 5 years. Global phenomenon technologies like Facebook and Twitter we're down to 2 to 3 years to be able to adopt those technologies by 25% of our population. So the whole thing's speeding up. Some people think we're going to reach some kind of magical wall where this is not going to continue, but I would argue that this is in fact going to continue, and the whole iterative process is going to get faster and faster and faster until we're going to get down to 18 months and a year, and then a few months, and down to weeks, and we'll actually get down to an intraday type of process where we'll create a technology in the morning, it'll be adopted globally that very same day, and we'll start to overcome some amazing problems that we have today. So virtual reality is a big one. And this is where the action is going to be in the next 20 to 30 years. Remember that the exponential power of technology is actually growing. So we also see a shrinking happening to computers, 100 times in 3D volume per decade. So this computer that I hold in my hands actually going to get in the next 25 years. And this is something we can actually predict. It's going to be 1 billion times more powerful, and it's going to shrink down to the size where I won't be able to see it with a naked eye. We'll be able to aerosolize and actually take that into the body. It'll reproduce exponentially. It'll go into our bloodstream and keep us clean from the inside, go into our capillaries, actually connect to every interneural connection in the brain. We'll actually take our 5 senses offline and actually connect to the internet in a way that will actually, well, our brains will actually be the internet. And you talk about a Google server farm today, every one of these nodes will be 1 billion times more powerful than these Google server farms today. So the whole processing power of the internet is going to grow dramatically, and our information base is going to grow by billions of times, and our intelligence is going to grow by billions of times. And we're going to live on this internet. It's going to expand our senses in ways that we can't even really imagine. For example, we'll be able to see in not just the visible spectrum of light, but in the entire electromagnetic radiation spectrum. So we'll be able to see in X-ray or gamma ray, or we'll be able to see in all these different spectra. We'll be able to smell in a greater range than the dog, or hear in greater frequency than the dog, for example. We'll be able to communicate at electronic speeds and not just at the slow chemical speeds of our biological brains. And we'll be able to have 1 million friends and communicate with them all at once. Again, 1 million times faster than the way we communicate today. So a lot of things are going to change. We start to go online. The whole notion of resource scarcity won't really apply in the same way. If you live in a virtual house, for example, you have a virtual Ferrari in your garage. If I have one virtual Ferrari of 14,000, it really doesn't matter. So the whole idea of resource scarcity is going to start to become diminished. We have some big challenges facing us today, and we could talk about these for a lot. This is really where the rubber meets the road, because these are all very common. Like, for example, energy is a big one today. We talk about how we're at peak oil and we're going to run out of energy. The truth is we receive 10,000 times more sunlight than we need every single day to power this entire planet. So with the exponential growth in these solar panels, because they're becoming an information technology, we're at 1% today. We get our energy in the US, we get 1% of our energy from solar panels. We're actually only 7 doublings away, at doublings happening every 2 years with solar power technology, that's 14 years, to get completely off 19th century, very dirty fossil fuels. And of course, this has other compounding effects because it eliminates pollution, that helps eliminate climate change, and on and on and on. So I take the example of some of our challenge to the remote village in Africa, where we're going to be using desktop nanoreplicators here in the next 20 years. We're going to be shipping these nanoreplicators to villages in Africa, let's say. The first thing they'll do, of course, is they'll replicate that replicator, and it'll grow exponentially. So everyone in that village, actually every family in that village, and then every person, of course, in that village will have this replicator in their house. They'll actually extrude the pieces, actually make their house. They'll get all the power they need for that house. It'll be decentralized, so no government or corporation can actually deny them the ability to have that power. And things are going to actually change. They'll be able to manufacture whatever they need, the computers they need to be creative on. They'll get all the food they need from this replicator. This is going to happen, we believe, actually in the next 20 to 30 years. And it really takes us to the thrill of living and what this whole idea project is about today. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it starts at the bottom with these physiological needs like breathing and having sleep and so on and so forth. And you start to move up this ladder, and then I would argue that as we start to move up and you give someone 3 square meals a day and a roof over their heads, the threshold for going to war and creating conflict in the world actually diminishes in a very great way. So again, everything starts to compound, and we'll start to move up to friendship and family and loving and self-esteem. And then finally, we'll be up the top capstone. And I believe, actually, and others do as well, that it won't be just the people in this room that are going to enjoy the thrill of living at this top capstone in terms of being creative and self-actualization in the next 25 years, but actually all 9 billion people on this planet are actually going to be able to participate at that level, and that truly will be the thrill of living. And I thank you so much for your time.